Hi, this is Lisa, and you are listening to I Love That Movie. This podcast is for movie lovers. It's not an unbiased opinion, it's not a straightforward review, it's just a couple people talking about a movie that they love. The format is each week I have a guest, and that guest and I discuss a movie that they love, something they're obsessed with, something they connect with. We'll talk about the plot, the director, and the actors, but we'll also talk about the personal connection my guest has with that movie. So if that sounds like something you want to listen to, keep listening. Hey, this is Lisa, and if you want to catch up with me on Twitter, you can find me at ILTM Podcast. I'm also on Instagram at I Love That Movie Podcast. And we have a Patreon. The show is always free, but if you want to support the show on there, you can. That's at patreon.com/I Love That Movie. And you get a weekly bonus episode when you sign up of just everything else I'm watching. For instance, this week I saw Deadpool and Wolverine again and started watching that Terminator Zero anime. So just all the other stuff goes on the Patreon. We have a lot of fun on there, but I want to turn my attention back to this episode. I've got a returning guest this week. You've heard him many times on the podcast. Say hi, Palmer.
Hi, Palmer. How you doing?
Doing well. In case people haven't heard your voice before, would you mind introducing yourself just a little bit?
Sure. My name is Palmer, and I'm co-host of Academy Rewind over at the Thought Bubble Audio Network. Right now, we're kind of on hiatus. Unfortunately, my co-host, decided to have a life and kids and a family and a job.
So selfish.
I
Just
That's
kidding.
what I keep trying to tell him. Worst case scenario is I can usually at least
Sorry,
wrangle him
Tim,
for I
if
can
you're
usually at
listening.
least wrangle him for 2 episodes a year, and it's the same two that we drag you into,
I
which is
love
the
doing it.
which is the best of, and then the current awards. And then I also used to co-host Batwoman TV Talk back when Batwoman was a thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. I love your show, and man, I know that life interrupts, so I completely understand, but hopefully we'll hear from y'all again soon. If
I hope so too. Like
yeah,
I miss doing podcasts, so I need to like trap another co-host
you do.
because I
Or just put your name out there and be like, "I'm ready to be a guest." Taking people.
This is true. I do know several others that do movie related podcasts, so I might have to start reaching out to them.
You may have to, but I'm glad that you're on here today. Always enjoy having you on, Palmer. But if people haven't heard an episode before, my guest actually picks the movie. So what movie did you choose to talk about today?
This time around, because I feel like whenever you have me on, you're always like, Palmer, I know you'll always pick like movies everyone's heard of and everyone is flocked to see.
Yes, if
And
there's one thing I know about you, it's all those things.
right. Just look at the Interstate 60 episode. But this time around, I chose a movie from 2000 called The Contender.
All right. Yeah, I have to admit, this was my first time watching this. I saw it on Pluto, as you suggested, for free. So thank you for that recommendation. Where did
I,
you see this movie?
I feel like the words, this is the first time I see it, has happened every single time I've been on this
That's
podcast.
probably true. You do pick some movies that I have not seen before, like you said.
So, I used to work at Blockbuster Video back in the day, and that's how I met my co host, Tim. Well, actually, we met way before that, but that's where we really started becoming friends. So I used to just
Aw.
watch about as much as I humanly could as far as movies. We had all the pay channels when I was growing up anyway. So it was just
Mhm.
something I always did, like regardless of the subject matter or what it was, I would watch movies generally every day. And this came along at a time, came out in 2000. So um, just the world events going on at the time we had a general election coming up, and this was actually going to be my first general election. So
Wow, that you
that's
were like voting in, you mean?
yeah. So this kind of came along at a time where I was trying to figure out what my ideals were politically.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I've seen this for the first time tonight, but I don't want to get too far into this without doing a synopsis, so we'll do that here. And just for anyone listening, I don't really do like a spoiler free than spoiler filled. I just tell you how it is. We're going to talk about it. So I assume that you've seen the movie before, or maybe you don't want to see the movie. Maybe you just want to hear us talk about it. I'm okay with whatever you decide, but you've been warned now. So I will go ahead and give that summary. And I get my summaries from Wikipedia. I'm not going to pretend it's a good source for some things, and one of them is movie summaries typically. So here we go. When the sitting vice president dies, Senator Lane Hansen is chosen by the president to be the first woman to hold the office. The selection meets with opposition from members of both parties, in particular, a powerful political adversary who will seemingly stop at nothing to discredit her. Her confirmation hearing set off a firestorm of controversy as shocking secrets from Hansen's past are revealed, threatening her personal life as well as her political future.
Yeah, that's about sums
Yep,
it up pretty well.
pretty much. This is also a part where I typically do a quick facts. I've only got one. There were a few, but this one was the most interesting to me, so I will share it. It's that President Barack Obama told Entertainment Weekly in 2008 that Jackson Evans, Jeff Bridges, was his favorite movie president. And I thought that was interesting.
That yeah, I saw that because I do the same thing. I'll look up trivia about the movies, especially when I know I'm going to talk about them.
Yeah.
I found that fascinating because when you think about like all the presidents we've had in cinema history, like I like Jeff Bridges. I think he plays a little bit more of a quirky president than we've
He's
seen in a
very
lot of
quirky.
times.
At times, borderline inappropriate, but we'll get into that.
Kind of, yeah. And
Not
I
bad, but just kind of like, oh, I don't think we do that today, kind of thing.
no, it's definitely going back and watching this. It's a
It's a
2000s
time
movie.
capsule, yeah, which
Yeah,
is fine. Like for people that are listening, like I try to. If we're gonna talk about movies people love, we're gonna talk about older movies, and we have to like not. I don't know. I try not to be too hard on them. So,
right.
yeah,
There's a lot of
it's
stuff
not
that you
bad.
can be like, it's of the time. Like
Yeah,
obviously there's things that even if they were quote unquote acceptable at the time, there's still like lines you shouldn't cross. But I
sure.
don't think this movie does
I don't think so. Yeah,
that
it
to
doesn't
that
it doesn't
egregious
do that.
point.
I agree. Um, but yeah, I'm almost like I mean, that's really cool, and I think Jeff Bridges does a good job, but what about the president from Independence Day? I'm just kidding.
Yeah, or even
Like, I don't know, there's been so many, you
it
know?
was funny because like I was torn between this or the movie The American President. But
Ah,
like
okay. I don't think I've seen that.
even like the American President, Michael Douglas, not Mike, was it? No, it wasn't Michael Douglas, was it? I don't know. But the president in that one is really good. Um, so yeah, Jeff Bridges kind of quirky. One interesting factoid, since we're gonna before we jump into the movie, because it happens right at the
It
beginning.
was Michael Douglas, by the way.
It was all right.
Mhm.
So right at the beginning of the movie, we have a cover song, a cover version of "Ring of Fire," which is a great Johnny Cash song. Did you happen to recognize who the singer was?
No, but I just thought I don't think I've heard a female cover of that song.
Well, it's actually a duo. So
Oh, okay.
the you hear the woman quite a bit, and her name is Kim Carnes, but
Okay.
her co-vocalist that you can hear in the background and kind of backing her up is Jeff Bridges.
Whoa, really?
Yes.
Interesting. I
Yep.
didn't know that he could sing, so that's cool. That's very interesting fact. I like that.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the director and the cast next?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So, So this movie actually has a pretty decent cast. When
Yes.
you, especially when you go back and look at it. So we've talked about Jeff Bridges. He's the president. The lead kind of adversary in the movie is played by Gary Oldman. He plays a
Mhm.
character called Shelley Runyon. Joan Allen plays Lainey Hanson, the woman who's trying to become confirmed to be vice president. She, up until this point, had really only played like like supporting male role, like being like the doting wife or like being supportive of like male characters in other movies. This was kind of her first kind of stepping out to be the center of a movie, and
Yeah.
she, like her and Gary Oldman both wrangled award nominations because of it. We also have Sam Elliott, who plays the chief of staff. Both him and Jeff Bridges don't have any sort of facial hair in this movie.
So weird.
Yes, and I've come to the conclusion Sam Elliott needs to always have his mustache
I
because
did not recognize him. I know that sounds ridiculous. Nick was like, "Come on." And I was like, "I he doesn't have the mustache." Like it threw me off. It really did. And plus, yeah, I'm not used to seeing him without that or used to seeing him younger. I won't say young, I'll say younger.
without his mustache, he
He's
came
powerless. I'm just kidding.
he is, but like his facial expressions come across so smarmy.
They do. That's such a weird thing. Like, yeah, you nailed it. It wasn't him in my mind. And you're right. Both of them are, clean shaven. They don't look like they do like in The Big Lebowski or something. But
Or virtually any of their
um
other roles, yeah.
yeah, it's so weird. They do both look so different.
Uh, and then rounding out the
And
cast, we have Christian Slater, who
yes.
plays another member of the committee that is in charge of appointing her to become voted on by the entire, because you got to be voted on by the House and Senate. But just like a Supreme Court nomination, you go into a committee first, and that you have to pass out of the committee before you can go to a general count. Um, and then the movie was written and directed by Rod Laurie, who has done the remake of Straw Dogs from a few years ago with James Marsden. He also did The Last Castle
Mm,
with Robert
okay.
Redford and James Gandolfini.
Nice.
And one thing I didn't know was he also did a movie the year prior to this called Deterrence that a customer of mine was telling me about because I told him I was going to be on this podcast and what we were talking about. And
Mhm.
that movie has Kevin Pollak, who plays a president who is snowed in like a random restaurant in Colorado, and
Interesting.
he has to deal with a possible first strike scenario.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I
So he
actually,
really likes this writer director likes things about the government.
yes.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
He also looks like he directed The Outpost. Um,
Yes, but I have never seen that.
I haven't either, but it's like one of the things that came up. Yeah, interesting. I mean, this so you mentioned earlier, you made a comment that like you pick things that not a lot of people have seen. So does The Contender fall under that or was it well
I
received?
So from my understanding, it wasn't completely well received, and
Mm,
I guess there's kind of some sort of back and forth in Gary Oldman's mind
I
about
saw that.
the movie kind of being recut and redone in post to slant a particular viewpoint, because and that's his opinion and he's welcome to it, but everything that I've seen about it also kind of said like he didn't he wasn't supposed to be like that bad of a guy. And I'm
Mhm.
watching this movie and I want to know like what cut in his mind is
Would
there
make
out
him the good
there.
guy. Yeah.
Right, like even if you're just like, well, because this is very this kind of stems out of like the Bill Clinton impeachment era, where you're getting like
Right.
where you're getting very like politicized partisanship on both sides, that even if you want to say like, well, he was just being partisan, but no, he's really trying to like ruin her life. Like
Yeah,
this,
and yeah. I don't
and there's a
really see it.
difference.
I agree, and I don't really see it as like I mean, I read what he said about the way he felt this movie leaned, but I didn't really detect that as much
Yeah, neither
as
do
I
I.
detected more just I think what happened, like you said, during the Bill Clinton administration, obviously influenced what
Yeah,
happens in this film, but like he was, very liberal. I mean, I think I thought it was more of a commentary on our political system in general and not so much picking a side. It's just saying like this is the kind of stuff that happens. This is the kind of stuff that would happen to a female candidate.
I
I thought
agree.
that's how I interpreted it. I mean, I don't think it matters what side of the political spectrum you're on, that would still happen. And things do get unnecessarily ugly. I mean, I think we can all agree without saying who we feel that way about. I mean, just in
Right.
general, it
No,
goes way too far. And I think we all know that. Like,
I completely agree, and
yeah.
I think this is giving the political setting because of the time, but it's
Right.
not necessarily a political story. Like
Yeah. I
this
didn't
would
see it
happen
that
to a
way.
woman in any sort of like executive position.
Yes. Yeah.
And as far as like the characters the characters' politics go, I think the movie does a really good job of trying to give like, so Jeff Bridges is supposed to play a Democratic president, but
Yeah.
like a few of his politics could also be construed as Republican as well. So I think he did a good job of trying to make them about like as much in the middle as possible, so you
Yeah.
couldn't have that argument of like, well, this is obviously slanted in a certain viewpoint, and that's all it cares about.
And it also feels like politics aside again, at the end of the day, it's like a power struggle, and everyone that's opposing her that is saying, "Oh, well, this is part of my belief system," or "Oh, this is part of this, is part of that." In reality, they
It
want power, and
right.
they
And
all want that. And so, like, there
yeah,
is kind of like this, they're not coming out and saying how any of them really feel because it is so heavily influenced by that. And then, yeah, of course, the character that our, quote unquote bad guy, Gary Oldman, he's definitely the most corrupted, or I guess second most corrupted, but but still, like, they're all kind of guilty of that.
right. Yeah. Yeah, they try and they try and use their politics to say this is why we're doing this. But at the same time, like you can tell it's not. Like
Yeah.
it's for the specific reason of this woman is trying to become a vice president, and
Yeah.
they're treating her differently than they would any other person.
Yeah, they're going after whatever is easiest to get her out of there,
Yeah,
which is much simpler to do than if they had a male opponent, essentially.
correct.
Because from a historical perspective, there had not been a female vice president yet.
This is
So,
correct.
yeah. So it's interesting. I mean, we're living in a different world from this movie, but not entirely different. So it's just I kind of sat down and thought, "Oh, I'll sit down and watch this." And then I did end up really liking it. I won't say that like it's a super fun watch, like it's a
No,
thrilling ride, but I thought it gave me a lot to think about. And I think you
right.
could put this like in I mean, I think there are things about it that are uniquely American, but really like you said, it could be at a different job or it could be in another country. I think this is just something that has happened before, and um, it's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Um, so you mentioned a couple other movies that the director did. Are you like a fan of his work, or is this kind of more just like
I I have not seen the new Straw Dog or new. came out in 2011 at this point. I haven't seen Straw Dogs. It's one that I've always wanted to watch, and I just never got around to it. I really enjoyed The Last Castle with Robert Redford and James Gandolfini.
Okay.
At the time, I probably didn't know that it was the same person. At that time, I don't think I was really paying particular attention to the writers and directors,
Yeah.
mostly just the cast.
Hmm.
So at the time, like I was just really drawn to like Jeff Bridges and Christian Slater. Gary Oldman at the time, I didn't know really who he was for at least a
Interesting. Yeah.
couple more years.
Yeah. He wasn't like really big yet. Yeah. It's such a, like you said before, I mean, the casting is like really great, but at the same time, maybe it's because some of them weren't as famous yet. I hadn't thought about that, but
Yeah,
probably true.
yeah. But so I one thing watching this, and I want to get your take on this because
Sure.
there's a scene in which we have Christian Slater kind of like walking around. I think it's the residency part of the White House. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily like the West Wing or the Oval Office area. And he's passing by like a bunch of the presidential portraits,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he stops at um, Kennedy, and
Hmm.
it's the famous photo of Kennedy like with his arms folded and kind of looking downward, and he kind of mimics that pose. And when he did that, I was like, we really missed an opportunity to get a JFK biopic with with Christian Slater.
Yeah. Yeah, I think his character probably feels connected to Kennedy because Kennedy was young,
Yeah.
and he's young. In the movie, he says he's 28, which I'm like, I guess that's a 2000s 28. But but um but yeah, I mean, I could totally see that.
I saw it and I'm like, wow, like just his hair, his
Yeah.
mannerisms, like it really fit. And I was like, oh, why didn't we ever get that movie?
Yeah.
It's weird, but
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but I like that. I co-sign it for you. I guess we're kind of getting into the plot of the movie a little bit. You mentioned that scene. What are some other scenes or other things that stick out to you about the movie?
one of the things that always stuck out to me, and I like this has to be why Obama really loved him as the president. There's this running like this movie is very serious,
Mhm.
but there's a running joke throughout the entire movie of the president like just always obsessed with the fact he can order anything from the White House staff for food and they'll have it. And he does it like 3 or 4 times in the movie. Whenever you see him, he's either eating or
Yeah.
or ordering food to eat. And, at one point he orders a shark steak sandwich, which I
Yep.
hadn't heard of until this movie. He just randomly decides to ask for like coq au vin and hazelnut pudding, and and then my favorite is like the last time we see him do it, he orders just like a grilled cheese, and they're like, "Sorry, we're out of we're out of the cheese."
The one simple
The
thing he orders.
right, like, but like that for some reason, like that running joke always stuck out to me.
That's funny. I also feel like it's saying, or it's like Jeff Bridges' way of saying in the movie, his character, like, let's just admit it, like, everybody wants, in this world to be president, and I'm there, and it's fun. There's some level of like, it's fun for me. Like,
Yeah,
I'm going to
I,
take advantage of the perks. Like, I do. That is
I
it kind of helps the movie because, like you said, it's very serious.
I really wonder if like that was a Jeff Bridges thing.
Yeah.
Like
He's like,
like
I'd
not
order whatever I want.
Yeah, like not so much necessarily like he completely ad-libbed it, but maybe when like he took the part, he was like, "Hey, what if we did this?" I know he had said in an interview about the movie he based his character off of his father, who had passed away a couple years prior. The hilariously wonderful Lloyd Bridges from
Mm,
Airplane and
Yeah.
hot shots. So it's nice to see it's nice to see him credit his father that way.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
That's really nice. Um, what else? What else can we talk about next?
The other thing that kind of stuck out to me is obviously like the crux of the story
Mhm.
of trying to tr- trying to ruin a person's image or career or what have you on personal matters that have nothing
Yeah.
to do with what's going on.
And specifically something that is, you know, basically okay, just come out and say it, their sex lives. Like
Right.
why does that matter and why do they have to bring up something from when someone was 19 and ruin their
In
life over
college.
it?
Yeah,
Yeah, in college.
like everyone does stupid stuff in college. I didn't. I didn't go to college, but if I had gone, I probably would have done something stupid. Like that seems to be what like it seems to be like what you have to do in college is pay a lot of money in tuition and do something stupid. Like
It's probably pretty accurate. And I think, you know, in this story, I guess for those listening, basically, you know, Joan Allen's character is stepping into the role of vice presidency, but like right before she does, the scandal comes out that like apparently in college she had slept with a bunch of people. There are supposedly photos of this, which that right there is really insane. But anyway,
thank you.
she's
I
having to defend this, and it's just totally absurd and inappropriate. Like, and that's, I mean, again, spoilers, I guess, but you find out that like that did not happen. I mean, like she was put in an uncomfortable situation, which by the way, you know, there's a lot around that situation that she didn't have control over that was really bad, and she was young and didn't have probably the sense of self to be like, wow, this is disgusting and I'm not participating in this. So she like almost did, but she didn't. But her point the whole movie is like none of this should be brought up again. It's not something that anyone should be talking about or
yes.
asking me about. And yeah,
And that's really like what drags it out for so long. Is like
yeah.
she could easily have said this didn't happen. She, you know, there are people that could corroborate her story, but she feels like it shouldn't even be a thing that she has to comment on because if it was a guy, it wouldn't matter.
Yeah, because as we know, I mean, you know, again, not saying anything political about a particular candidate, but just saying that in our history we've had our fair share of scandals, which I mean, you know, again, I think some of which shouldn't be brought up, right? Like
Right.
it's just dragging out someone's personal life and then saying like, oh, well, now they can't be president. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
sometimes
because
it's a little too far, and we all know that. You know, I'm not going to say a particular name, but yeah,
no, exactly. Like like even what they're accused, like they're not accusing her of being in, you know, of having an extramarital affair or even doing something illegal. Like the
right.
entire crux is willingly participating in a sexual act, and in this
Right.
instance with multiple partners. Like it's there, you know, there's nothing about it except like a vague sense of morality.
Yeah. And then when you find out like what exactly took place, she's pretty much the victim of that situation. Like, but which I
Yeah,
suspected from the beginning. I was like, this is really weird. I feel like part of it's going to be true, but I feel like it's going to be kind of dark. And then at the end she finally talks about it and you're like, "Oh, that's horrible." And you know, sort of a commentary I think on like sororities and fraternities and issues around some of that, some scandals around that. And so like, you know, when you finally find out the answer, you're like, man, but again, you know, the president's like, why don't you just come out and say like all this happened to you? And she's like, well, because it's nobody's business. Like it
right.
truly is not, you know.
I I had remembered. a good deal of this movie, because I went back and rewatched it myself just to brush up on it. I had forgotten like the very end when she talks about what actually happened, and as she's going through it, my mind not remembering where she's going with the story, my mind is just like, oh my god, I made Lisa
I made her watch this
agree.
movie where she's like, "Well, here's what
I
all I did that night," and you'd be
I was
like,
like,
"What?"
I made Lisa agree to talk about a movie in which, and like I really thought the end was going to be like serious accusation level crimes, but then she's like, and so I left, and that was just a random woman in the photographs, and it wasn't me. I was like, oh, thank God.
Yeah, I was I kind of suspected that it was gonna end the way that it did, so I wasn't too
Right.
worried about it. I was like, I feel like she's gonna end up saying, like, that she was put in an uncomfortable position, and it's gonna be like, "Why is no one talking about that? Like, why is no one saying, like, that was not okay at college to do that, and for everyone to know that that was an expectation, like, that was bad?" But
Yeah.
I did not worry. I had faith in you. I did not think that was gonna happen. I actually did really like it because I like that because if she had said, like, "Oh, that wasn't me, that's some other lady," then I mean, it's already happening essentially. Someone else is being humiliated in that
Yeah.
scenario, right? And I think she
Yep.
knows that and is like, I'm not gonna bring more people down just because this is embarrassing me, and I
Yeah.
really appreciated
It
that.
if she comes out and says like that's not me in the photograph. Like I left, and this woman came in. Like given the way the media is, like they would have found who this woman is, who probably has a husband and kids by now, who might not want their family to know about dumb stuff they've done in college,
Yeah,
and
right,
that
there's,
could
like, so
ruin
much
somebody
we
else's
don't
life.
know based on pictures from a
Right.
million years ago, like, nobody knows what actually happened. So it's, like, better that we not even go there. Yeah, I agree, and, I liked her stance of, like, "I'm just not gonna answer questions about that, like, I'm just not going to dignify that with an answer," and
Right.
even when they put her in, like, almost impossible situations, like, she can't see who's interviewing her, they surprise her with someone's like, "Oh, I went to college with her, and that was like, no matter what, she was just kinda like, "Alright, I mean, if this is what you're gonna do, then I will walk away, like, we're going to talk about the job, we're gonna talk about my stance as a candidate, we're not gonna talk about all these other things." And what's unique about her compared to a lot of the other characters in the movie is that she holds onto her principles so much she even tries to step down. She's like, I would rather step down than play these games. Like, I just will not do it. And like, I think that's the thing with, Gary Oldman. There's a scene like with him and his wife where she was like, I thought that we put all of our dreams aside because we were doing the right thing. And then for you to do this, it's like you're basically,
Yeah.
undermining your own career with this nonsense.
A-
And yeah,
And
go ahead.
she even tries to help out Joan Allen
Yeah.
by giving her dirt on stuff that that Gary Oldman's character doesn't know about, but would damage him politically very badly. And she refuses to use it because, she's like, look, you know, my morals are my morals, and they're only good if I stick by them when they're inconvenient. Like
Yeah,
me
I
taking
thought
the
that was a
easy
good
way
line.
out. Yeah, me
Yeah.
taking the easy way out and ruining him for being human or doing stuff that shouldn't matter to his elected office is the same exact thing that he's trying to do to me, and I won't do that.
Yeah.
Her character is really the only one that is like 100% in the right, kind of. Like Jeff Bridges is kind of there, but he is doing this for a very selfish reason.
Yeah.
Like he says it several times, like I'm, I'm making a woman the vice president that's the end. That's the end of the argument,
Yeah.
which
Right. Which
admirable,
mhm.
but is kind of self-serving.
Right, and, like, it also gives weight to what some of the other characters in the film say. Like, they're like, "Well, I'm just not just gonna vote for her because she's a woman." If he's literally coming out and saying he's putting her in that position because she's a woman, then he is, by extension, validating what they're saying. So it's yeah,
Right.
and then there's another guy, a big reveal at the end that I think I saw coming, but William Peterson's character, at the beginning of the film,
So
the film
he was
basically. Oh, go ahead.
he is so his character is supposed to be like the head candidate for the
Vice
vacancy of vice president.
Right.
When we open the film, he's out fishing with a reporter, and a car drives off a bridge right near them where they're fishing. He jumps into the lake to try and save the driver. He can't, and she dies. Basically, when he goes to see the president, and a few minutes later, uh, they pretty much tell him, like, look, it's not going to be you. The reason they give him is because even though he tried to save the person, she died. So it would be a thing. Unfortunately, it's a like it's not a valid reason in terms of like it shouldn't be, but it's a valid reason in the terms of yeah, they're probably right on that.
Well, and it's also like, okay, so yeah, right after that scene, his supporters, his crew is like, well, does it matter that she died because you tried to save her? And it's like right away they're already trying to spin this person's death as, oh, well, how is this going to affect your candidacy, which is
Right.
crazy, right? And you're already kind of like, and that kind of sets the tone for the movie of like, they're going to talk about stuff like that.
Yeah, everyone's out for themselves.
Right. And so again, it's like, he's upset because now he's not going to get this candidacy. Again, more upset about that than someone's death.
Yeah.
And then you've got, Gary Oldman, who is going to take her down any way he can, again, because he has something to gain. And then Christian Slater, posing in front of that JFK picture. They're all like, they're very motivated by the office itself and not, anything
Yeah.
else. And then we find out at the end of the film that that person very conveniently died, and that he orchestrated it. And obviously he didn't mean for her to die, he meant
Mhm.
to save her, but he convinced her to do that, which a reporter earlier in the film had said, wait, like, what were you fishing for again? And like,
Yeah.
what kind of bait did you use? And he like couldn't answer simple questions about fishing, and she was like, that's weird. And so then later we find out he's the real scandal, is he's a criminal,
Right. So
But yeah.
so the that woman who was asking the questions, we see her several times throughout the movie, and we think she's just a reporter, maybe trying to get like a special interest story on him. He was a governor. They never say what state he is, but
Oh yeah,
so I'm
you're right.
so
He's a good one.
I'm gonna refer to him as a governor. You know, to human interest story on him. Maybe they think with everything that's going on with Lane Hansen, maybe he'll be the next in line. So you think she's just doing a regular like story on the events, what happened at the bridge, and that to kind of drum up him as a hero. And it turns out she's actually an FBI agent,
Oh, that's right.
and she was tasked to look into everything to make sure everything was kosher. Turned out it wasn't. But when I was watching this, after years after years, when you see her in the water, and there's a good like back and forth shot of him trying to help her. We see his face, and then you can see her face clearly in the window of her car, and she's desperately asking for help, and she's pounding on the glass. The last time you see her face before it kind of fades backwards to kind of denote like she's gone, She says, "Save me, governor."
Mm.
So if you don't catch it, which I never did until this time around,
Wow.
is she obviously knows who he is. Now, he's a governor. You could argue he's probably, he's a public figure. But at that point in time, I don't know if I would have the wherewithal to recognize this person trying to save me as I
Yeah.
was gasping for my life.
And can
So
you remind me,
it was
like,
kind of a break.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Why did he convince her in particular to do this?
They don't they don't say like what. So essentially, maybe to forward his own political ambition because he wants to be president someday. Like, they keep calling him the future of the party,
Mhm.
but he's still just a governor. So, time's a ticking. So he hired this woman out of a Soldier of Fortune magazine. So basically, all we know about her is she was in the armed services, and
Mhm.
now she does soldiering for hire, pretty much, like whether it be basic
Okay.
security or what. This is kind of like how she makes money, is putting like for hire in magazines. And Soldier of Fortune magazine would be like where you would go if you needed like a security detail or
Uh-huh.
a bodyguard,
Oh,
or like the A team.
got it. Okay. So that's why he thought she was like a safe bet to like that he could save. I guess she's a tough
Right.
person and okay.
Yeah, but he just, I think neither one of them, for some reason, thought of how difficult it is to open a car door
I was
underwater.
about to say like that's not easy to do. I mean, that's why people drown in that
Yeah,
situation so
like
easily like yeah.
what I don't understand is, if like this is the plan, like you're gonna drive off a bridge and he's gonna quote unquote save you. Like, my thought process would be, have the window rolled down,
Right.
because then it's a matter of, like, even if you're panicking to trying to get your seatbelt off, there's a better chance of them being able to help you with that than trying to open a car door underwater. Like,
Right.
it's very, like, just like the physics alone are baffling.
It's an incredibly dumb plan. I mean,
Yeah, no,
like,
it
there are
is.
so many other things he could have done that would have been easier to pull off. It's like, why?
Yeah,
But, it seems so outlandish at the time that you're not, like, immediately suspicious of it, you know?
that's true. Like, once the plan comes out, you're like, what idiot thought of this plan?
Yeah, yeah,
And, like, you know, the tragedy of this person dying aside, because they willingly, unfortunately, they willingly put their life on the line in this plan.
so he can
But
be president. Yeah,
right,
what?
but my thought process is, if nothing else, why am I going to vote for the person who came up with this idiotic plan?
Yeah, like, he doesn't seem very trustworthy or reliable, and turns out he's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's funny. Man, we spent a lot of time really digging deep into that, but yeah, it's
Oh, yeah, because
it's
it's
confounding.
look, it was either that, or we really, like, pick at the question of, how the heck did pictures from this college party 30, 35 years ago survive this long?
Yeah, it's very strange. I'm like,
You know,
it's just icky, and, like, in that court scene too, I'm like, "What the heck?" Like, this is too
yeah,
much.
yeah, like, I it you're not supposed to feel good. Like, you're supposed to,
Yeah,
they even kind of allude to it, like they're trying to, they allude to, like, ending a life. They're trying to end her career and her, like, for anything virtually.
yeah,
And it's not supposed to feel comfortable as the viewer, which I think it does a really good job of doing.
right.
I do think that it could have been worse.
I agree. I think it could have been yeah, I think that they definitely It's on the line sometimes. I mean, I think
Yeah.
intentionally, but they don't go there too much. Like they do it just enough to where you're thinking about like the moral issue that's happening to her without it just focusing on those details too much. I think they do a good job.
One of the things that I know got cut in this, there was a side story which I'm really happy got cut. So for one scene and one scene only, we meet Laney's father,
Mhm.
who's a retired governor of some state, and there was their whole scene is like they're on they're on different parties. He's a Republican. She used to be, and she's now a Democrat, which is one of the reasons why Gary Oldman's character doesn't like her.
Mhm.
Not that she's a Democrat, but that she left his party and went over to another one.
Oh, okay.
Um, but so there's this thing where her father hasn't come out and really like said, I fully endorse my daughter for vice president. And he's like, well, I haven't said anything against you. You know that I just
Mm,
don't like talking to the press after being in the governor's mansion for years. And she even says, like, I completely understand. Could you just at least say something?
yeah.
So there's like, they can't say, well, you're not saying anything, so you must feel this way. And he agrees to it. There's a cutout story. I don't know if they ever filmed any of it, but there was a side story with him supposedly having used his influence to get her elected in the first place.
Oh, okay.
And that supposedly comes out, and he like it was under like she didn't know about it. It had nothing to do with her. It was just him using political influence to help her out. And he doesn't survive the movie basically. And I'm glad like that was cut out because I think that would have been too much.
Yeah.
Like for one, out of left field, not really the point of the movie, and two, that that would be over the line at this point. Like
Mhm.
they kind of tiptoe right up to the line, and it's like
Yeah.
just one more thing pushes it over.
Yeah, I agree. There's also another little not a side plot, but like another thing that happens to Joan is that, something comes out about an infidelity that she took part in. Um, but I like how they bring it up, but they don't it doesn't stick, compared to
Oh
the other
right,
thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. I was like, wait, what infidelity did she have? But you're
She
right.
slept
So
with her
she met,
best friend's husband, yeah.
yeah. So her current husband, they met when he was married to her best friend, and they had an affair. He left her and married Joan Allen.
Yeah,
So yeah, again, it unfortunately it happens. Like
yeah,
they even say, like it wasn't malicious. There was nothing messy about it, except for the fact of it did end one marriage. But there's always it's hard to
yeah.
it's hard to deal with that sort of issue and not automatically try and paint somebody in a positive or negative light because of it.
Sure, sure. Yeah, yeah. I thought that was interesting, and again, like, when you look at a lot of candidates, I mean, lots of people have something like that in their past, and it doesn't necessarily influence their office, but for a female candidate, it really could, and I think that was, another point they were trying to make. It's like, she has to literally be perfect,
Yeah,
in order
she
to be the best candidate, and
right,
that's
and
a little
it
unfair.
just right, and it's the double standard. It doesn't matter who you are. Women are held to a different standard than men,
Yeah,
and
especially
it's
in that arena, yeah.
yeah, in that arena, in a lot of arenas. But
Yep.
this is the arena that this movie chooses to kind of go in because it's like it tries to use it as well, like how divided kind of different areas of the country are. Like some
Mhm.
areas, it's not a thing. It's nothing. But in other areas, like this is like the most important thing to ever happen.
Right, it feels kinda antiquated, the big deal they're making out of certain things. You're like, "Well,
Yeah,
that's weird, like, that's not that big of a deal," but like you said,
like
it's not fair in every area.
yeah, like you should hold people to higher standards depending upon their station in life,
Sure.
but not when it doesn't matter to the station.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like I don't want to put somebody in charge of a bank if they, if they have a history of stealing.
Or being bad with money or something, I don't
Right.
know. Yeah, it's like they
You
should
know,
know the job that they're in, but
right.
you shouldn't be
But
like, "Oh, I heard that you used to fib about your age," or, like, something that, like, isn't
right,
important. Yeah,
you know,
yeah, agreed. Yeah.
uh so how do you feel about how do you feel about our young Christian Slater in this movie?
I mean, I wasn't a huge fan, but I do think that towards the end of the movie, he seems to be conflicted.
He
Um,
he does.
he has a turn where he's like, "Okay, he got caught up, I think. He was young,
He was
that makes him kind of
ambitious.
impressionable." Yeah, and so he got really swept up, and then towards the end, he's like, "You know what? I don't wanna do this." And so, like, I respect that about the character. I thought that was a good arc for him.
It was. I don't know why, but I've never really noticed like the cadence of his voice until this movie. And I'm like, oh, like it's weird, but yeah, so he's ambitious. He's kind of trying to move his career along faster than it should naturally progress.
Yeah,
But you're right. At one point, he does kind of, he has this come to Jesus moment where it's like,
yeah.
you know, this might not be how I should do it.
Yeah, especially so early on, man. But yeah, I like that part that he has that turn. I feel like I think there are even parts when Gary Oldman's character is struggling with his stance. Like I think the more resolute and straight-laced Joan is, the more the rest of the characters have to realize how bad they look by comparison, I think.
Yeah. I don't know if I would completely agree that Gary Oldman's character has any
Yeah,
sort
maybe
of
not. You could be
moral,
right.
like, I
Maybe I'm
think
giving him
he's
too much credit. Maybe I just like Gary Oldman, I don't know.
this is true. Like, and I also really like Gary Oldman. Uh, I think he's the only one who doesn't kind of see the error of
Mm.
his ways.
Well, I mean, you've seen this movie more than me. Maybe I was looking for some sort of redemption for him. Um, so that's probably the case. I mean, he's
In fact,
definitely the antagonist of the film.
like he's really only taken down because like the president finally steps in and says like, look, she's not gonna talk about this stuff. She's not gonna defend herself against this stuff. But I'm gonna make sure this is done fairly. So he essentially sabotages Gary Oldman because we find out like him and the kind of person waiting in the wings to get the vice president job are kind of friendly.
Yeah.
Like they're not best friends, but they have a working relationship, and that's who kind of Gary Oldman kind of decides should be the vice president.
Mhm.
In his mind, like he should be the one that gets to make that choice, and that's the person
Yeah.
he decides on. So the president, before he before like it gets out that the governor paid this woman to drive off the bridge, he goes to Gary Oldman and he's like, "Look, she, we'll get her to step down, or you will vote her down. We'll choose him, but we have to make sure like it's a smooth confirmation. So you have to come out and publicly endorse him before we even get going. And Gary Oldman does that, and that's when the president, calls them all into a meeting one day and shows them the file.
Yep.
And and it's a really good moment because he he kind of gets what he deserves,
Yes.
but at the same time it's nothing that'll ever be known.
Yeah.
So like he can just kind of sweep it under the rug. So he doesn't
Hmm.
even really get like comeuppance. He just gets like in his mind he knows he got, which is good. Which is good
Yeah.
enough.
Right. No, I agree. It's just like, well, you have to step down and back off. And it's like kind of the one time it's like, okay, we're gonna use your tactics then. You still need to back down, kind of thing. But he definitely deserved it, and so we don't feel sorry for him.
Yeah. I've had the movie on in the background and I just got to a scene in which like Sam Elliott is smiling and he's talking to the FBI woman after she hands him the file, and I'm just
Yeah.
like even with it on mute, I'm like, why does he look so smarmy?
So true.
Oh God, who told him to shave his mustache for this movie?
I know. They should that they need to go after that person because that was the bad call in the movie for sure.
Ah,
So funny.
no, it's such a good movie.
Oh yeah, I
So
want to walk back something I said earlier too. I
okay,
said, how was this received? I meant box office wise.
box office
Because
wise,
and you said not great, but like the Academy and the Golden Globes did love this movie. Just
right,
wanted to say that.
which does happen from time to time.
Yeah.
So let's see. According to IMDb, the budget for the movie was an estimated $20 million. Look at that, back when budgets were reasonable. And its gross worldwide was 22 million. So not
Wow.
great.
Yeah.
You know, in theory, it kind of eked out a little bit of a profit, although, you get the old adage of whatever the budget is, you gotta double it to factor in marketing.
Right.
So not great.
Mhm.
Um, which I can understand. Like I don't remember this movie being that talked about when I was watching it. I wasn't really following awards at the time, so I only knew that they had gotten nominated after the fact.
I see.
But I am happy because I will say that I think Joan Allen does a really good job of what she does, and Gary Oldman I think is this is a different role than I've really seen him in.
Yeah, I mean he's not the main character. He's a bad guy, but he's not it's not like a really big performance for him.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not, but
But
at
it's
the
also
same
not Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. It's still
oh,
somewhere
yeah.
in between.
But I think he does a really good job. I think he does a really good job at being the person to hate in this movie.
Yes, I
Like he
agree.
he just does a real like you believe that he thinks he's doing what is right or moral.
Yeah.
And that's what you have to convey when you're the villain. Like
Mhm.
the
Yeah,
the best villains are the ones who convince themselves they're right.
100%.
And I was wrong. He was not nominated for the Academy Award for it. He was nominated for Spirit Award,
Oh,
but
okay.
the two Oscar nominees out of this movie were Joan Allen for Best Actress and then Jeff Bridges for supporting.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
And Joan Allen was nominated for a Blockbuster Entertainment Award back when that was a thing.
Interesting. Okay.
They used to put the
Very cool.
kiosks in the store so you could vote on them.
Ah, well, is there anything else from this movie you wanted to cover or talk about?
Yeah, why did we never get a sequel?
Second term or something.
Yeah, we could have I'm gonna somebody I'm gonna find Rod Laurie who did this movie, and we're gonna find out what happened to Lane Hansen. Did she become a president after the fact? What happened to Jeff Bridges' character? I have answers. I have questions that need answers. But other than that, no, no. I think that's I think
Okay.
that's everything I can think of for this movie.
Okay. Well, that brings me to my last couple of questions then. Number one, what about this film keeps you coming back?
The the story of the story of someone fighting for the truth and what is right, not just what's easy for them, but for what should be right, and hopefully by doing this will change the world for the better. It's kind of like it's not
Mm,
it's not Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Like, it's not the little guy trying to stand up to government corruption,
yeah.
but it is like a similar story where this
Mhm.
one woman is standing up for what she believes in the face of just unrelenting unrelenting anger and vitriol against her.
Yeah. Yeah. No, completely agree there. And how how would you advertise this to someone that is thinking about seeing the movie, or how do you pitch it to somebody?
It is a political thriller that doesn't really get bogged down in political ideology.
I agree. I agree with that. Like, I have to disagree with Gary Oldman, as we did earlier, that I think he was viewing it under a lens, but I think the movie itself is just making some points about, what is appropriate to talk about with political figures and
Right.
specifically
And
female candidates, yeah, because there's not that many of them.
right. And I will say, because I don't want someone to get kind of waylaid. We haven't discussed it, and we're not going to. But this movie does have, this movie does show like certain polarizing points of view in brief instances.
That's true. That's a good thing to point out.
But overall, like, that's not the focus of the movie, which I
Agreed.
think is really good. So
Yeah.
it's I would you know I wouldn't say it's like The West Wing, because I
Yeah.
think The West Wing has a little bit more levity to it.
Yeah.
But how The West Wing always tried to kind of be in the middle and justified. That's what
I agree
what
with
this
that.
movie kind of does.
I agree with that statement. Well, Palmer, this has been a great discussion, and you've been a great guest as usual. But
Thank you.
yeah, I just want to thank you for coming on, and hope to have you back soon.
Anytime.
Great,
Anytime you need a movie that no one's ever heard of, I have like a list.
awesome! I cannot wait. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.